Hello, 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 Facebook friends. John Bush here to talk about Bitcoin once again. It's a little bit late, so try to stick with it. So for those of you familiar with Mike Adams, the Health Ranger of naturalnews.com, you may know that he is like militantly opposed to Bitcoin. Possibly because he feels like he missed out. I don't know. But if you just search Mike Adams Bitcoin, he has written a series of articles over the past couple of years about Bitcoin being a bubble, just pure speculation. It's collapsing, and he's encouraging the people that follow him not to get involved with Bitcoin, which is interesting because he's like a libertarian leaning natural health guy who is deep into conspiratorial view of history and all that jazz. And he may be like feeling critical of Bitcoin because he thinks it might be centralization. I don't know. He has all sorts of arguments, but most of them are weak. And I have respect for the guy. He's got a really popular website. I've met him in person, got good energy. He's into natural health, as am I. But when he speaks about Bitcoin, he only illustrates his own ignorance. And there's a whole slew of people that are critics of Bitcoin that are very ignorant of Bitcoin. And I have a feeling if they gave it an objective evaluation and spoke with someone that could overcome their objections, which are oftentimes baseless and unsound, hopefully they would change their tune. Okay, so in this talk also, we're going to talk about proof of work. And for those of you that are just beginning to explore Bitcoin, I'll do my best to explain Bitcoin mining and proof of work because it's extremely complex. You don't have to know how all of this works in order to embrace Bitcoin, in order to invest in Bitcoin, or in order to use Bitcoin, much like no one that writes a check knows how the Federal Reserve clearinghouse works with all the back internal processes. You don't have to know, but it's good to know, and it's interesting to know for sure because Bitcoin is a decentralized network. It's a decentralized non-institution, and in order to make that work, there are some really interesting mechanisms and incentives and disincentives in place, which are absolutely fascinating, especially if you're an anarchist like myself, because this is all groundbreaking stuff, and it's really exciting to be a part of it. All right, so let's get to it. Also, towards the end of the article, he has 7 questions that are like these big 7 questions for Bitcoin supporters. Let's see if they can answer these. These are like gotcha questions. So I haven't read those questions in a while, so I'm going to do them blind. I read them a couple months ago, when I came across this article. It's written in September. Crypto is backed by electricity. Electricity is actually not a finite resource, but generating electricity takes work, money, energy, input, much like a gold mine takes energy, capital, investment, equipment, labor. That helps with the generation of Bitcoin, make sure it's not just going to generate left and right, and you actually have to put some real world utility into it to generate the Bitcoin. Okay, so I'll explain what mining is as we go with this article. So the headline is, John McAfee accidentally just revealed why Bitcoin is a total fraud. Behold the logic of artificial work. How's that for a headline inviting people to come read it? Oh my God, what did John McAfee do? In a recent CNBC interview that's been widely touted by self-deluded Bitcoin promoters as some kind of smackdown of JP Morgan CEO Jamie Dimon, Bitcoin advocate John McAfee accidentally admitted why Bitcoin is a total fraud that's doomed to fail. All of his articles are like, Bitcoin's doomed to fail, Bitcoin's 2000, look how it's a speculative bubble. Now, I will give him that. In my honest opinion, as a Bitcoin supporter and advocate, much of the price action right now is due primarily to speculation and new money coming in rather than adoption and real world utility. I hate to say it, but that's the truth. That doesn't mean that Bitcoin won't establish itself as a medium of exchange with a stable value that can be a store of value and thus a legitimate currency. That's just to say that the reason why Bitcoin is 10,000 to 11,000 right now is because people are speculating and trying to make money. But in order to have a successful currency, you need to have a lot of liquidity so things can happen on the network, so exchanges can take place, so people can feel value, have value receiving Bitcoin and then converting it to something through fiat if they want to make real world expenses that are not yet available in crypto. Okay, so here's what McAfee said. However, sir, you call Bitcoin a fraud. I guess he's talking to Jamie Dimon. We create Bitcoins. I'm a Bitcoin miner. It costs over $1,000 per coin to create a Bitcoin. What does it cost to create a US dollar? Which one is the fraud? Because the dollars cost whatever the paper costs, but it costs me and other miners over $1,000 per coin. It's called proof of work. And then Mike Adams says, behold the logic of artificial work, how John McAfee just embraced Paul Krugman's ditch digging fable. The problem with John McAfee's explanation, of course, is that he admits Bitcoin can only be created through the practice of computational wheel spinning operations, where the difficulty and duration of such wheel spinning is artificially made needlessly complex by Bitcoin's algorithm. What does he go on to say? He goes on to say, okay, he's just basically saying that the proof of work, the mining process, the process of mining Bitcoin and verifying the transactions on the network is wheel spinning, computational wheel spinning operations. He says that they have no utility. It turns out it's artificial work. He basically says there's no use for that. You're just spinning your wheels. Well, there is a use for having a high amount of computing power on the Bitcoin network. So first of all, for those of you new to Bitcoin, even for people that are familiar with Bitcoin, this shit gets really complex. So I'm going to do my best to describe it. And if there's any Bitcoin experts out there, feel free to weigh in if there's a better way to put it. So you have the Bitcoin network, which is comprised of Bitcoin nodes, which are servers that host the Bitcoin blockchain, which is a digital file that's a collection of every single Bitcoin transaction and every single Bitcoin on each person's account, their public address, throughout the history of Bitcoin since it began. So that's a node. People run this on a computer. Then you have Bitcoin miners, which right now are strong, super fast, super powerful computers that use ASIC chips, application-specific integrated circuit chips that are designed specifically to break through the SHA-256 algorithm to solve problems with the SHA-256 algorithm. And those mining computers, they are tasked with verifying the legitimacy and authenticity of the transactions that are taking place on the network by cross-referencing the transaction that you're initiating with the history of the blockchain to ensure that you legitimately received that Bitcoin from the person that sent it to you. And to do that, they check and see if that person legitimately received the Bitcoin from the person, the address that sent it to them. If that address received it legitimately, it's a series of inputs and outputs. Does that make sense? Are you guys still with me? So these Bitcoin computers, the mining computers, Bitcoin miners, they use these complex chips, takes a whole lot of energy. And basically, Satoshi, so it's a decentralized network, and there's a public ledger. So how are we going to have a decentralized network of computers and entities that verify the transactions that take place on the network without having to trust them or pay them through a central source? Well, we're going to reward people for running those computers with Bitcoin. And that's actually how we're going to mint Bitcoin. So in the beginning, every miner that solved a block and added a block to the blockchain, verified the transactions that took place within that given period, which is supposed to be around 10 minutes, was rewarded with newly minted Bitcoin. In the beginning, it was 50. 4 years later, it was 25. Now it's 12.5. And soon it will be 6.25. And what is that? And then before that, it'll be 3.175. And it's going to go every 4 years. It'll half until all 21 million Bitcoin are generated in the year like 2140 or so. Okay. So the idea is it's decentralized. We want a bunch of people to run these computers. We don't want like 2 big firms to run these mining computers. We don't want people in Silicon Valley to only run the computers. We want a distributed, decentralized network that spans the entire globe with as many people hosting these nodes, which host the blockchain, and hosting these computers as possible. Okay? So how are we going to incentivize people to run these computers? Many people to run these computers. Well, we're going to reward them with Bitcoin for paying and managing these computers, which I've done before in the past for like 6 to 8 months. It was very hard. It was a pain in my ass. Took me away from my family. It was difficult. It takes a lot of work, and it takes a whole lot of energy. Thankfully, we managed to talk our landlord at the office that we were renting into us paying rent with Bitcoin and paying the utility bill with Bitcoin. So that was cool. Is the video still scrambled? Give me feedback. It doesn't seem scrambled on my end. Okay, so we're incentivizing people to run these computers in a decentralized way. No one's managed by any central authority. Everyone just runs the program. We're incentivizing them by paying them this 50 Bitcoin. Okay, so why does it take so much energy to run these computers? Well, each of these Bitcoin miners are competing for the privilege of adding the next block to the blockchain. And in order to earn that right, they have to solve a really complex puzzle that's made with a mathematical function. They have to figure out the source of a cryptographic hash. So let's say you have a statement like, man, John's great at explaining Bitcoin at 1 a.m. in the morning. That's the statement. You can run the SHA-256 algorithm over that statement and come out with a computational hash, which is it's a hexadecimal phrase that's a series of numbers and letters. Okay, so you have this core phrase, John's really good at explaining Bitcoin at 1 a.m. Then you have a computational hash that you put out. Okay, so it's pixelating. I wonder if I could pause and start back. We're just going to keep on going. Computational hash you put out. So if you change one word in this original phrase, John is really good at explaining, we can say John is not so good at explaining Bitcoin at 1 a.m., then the hash will be completely different. Even if you change one word or one letter, the hash will be completely different. So what do these Bitcoin miners do? They use a lot of computing power and energy to figure out what the source of this hash is. Whoever figures out what the hash is, they earn the right to add the next block. This takes a whole lot of energy. And this is important because it has to take a lot of energy because you can't have the same group of miners solving all of these blocks because they would be able to manipulate the blocks, they would be able to reward themselves money, they would be able to reverse previous transactions. So there has to be an incentive not to do that. And if you do that, if you start manipulating the blocks, then the other miners on the network won't add the block that you just solved to the chain, to the longest chain. Okay, so Mike Adams is trying to say that it's simply computational wheel spinning operation, and the difficulty is made needlessly complex by the Bitcoin algorithm, as though there's no function for this. The function is, as more mining computers get added to the network, it has to get more difficult to solve those problems because the Bitcoin network is trying to maintain a consistent time frame that each block will be added, 10 minutes, okay? So when a block is added, it's supposed to take 10 minutes, and it's supposed to be, the difficulty is supposed to be such that it takes 10 minutes to solve this block and add this block. And if there's so much more computing power added to the Bitcoin network that now it takes less than 9-10 minutes in order to solve the block, then it makes the Bitcoin protocol makes it more difficult to solve that block such that it levels back out to 10 minutes. Okay, does that make sense? So the difficulty changes. And Mike Adams makes this really ignorant statement by saying that that admission would be shocking to all Bitcoin holders, the fact that it costs $1,000, for the simple reason that if Bitcoin drops below $1,000, mining now becomes unprofitable. So this is a key fatal error in Mike Adams's argument, and it just illustrates his ignorance on the topic. So as Bitcoin prices go up, more people are inclined and incentivized to add computing power to the network because the energy that it costs to run these Bitcoin miners is less than the price of Bitcoin. So if that's the case, if it costs less to run the machine than the Bitcoin that you could potentially win from running the machine, then more people are going to run the machine, thus increasing the computing power and the security on the network. Here's one thing I failed to mention that's key that Mike Adams doesn't recognize. it's important that it's extremely difficult to solve these computational functions, these hashes, in order to earn the rights to add the next block to the blockchain. It's important that it's difficult, because if it were not difficult, then a bunch of computers would be able to band together and execute what's called a 51% attack, where they gain 51% of the computing power on the network, and they can manipulate transactions, they can reverse transactions, they can send Bitcoin, and then make it as though they never sent that Bitcoin. Okay, so I'm not sure if I'm explaining this clearly, but it's a decentralized network. There isn't a referee, there isn't a central authority to make sure that everything is legit and to make sure that there aren't bad actors. So Satoshi Nakamoto, he, she, they, them, the NSA, who knows, had to come up with a mechanism that could be put in place to ensure that a group of miners or an individual or bad actors don't gain 50% or more of the computing power on the network, so they can then manipulate things. Okay, so as more and more computers come on, and as the computing power rises, it becomes harder to get so much computing power to be able to execute a 51% attack. So there's like all these built-in incentives in place. So let me try to explain that again. So if it took a small amount of computing power to solve blocks and to add blocks to the blockchain, then it would be easier for bad actors to take a majority share of the computing power in order to execute fraud. When there is a vast amount of computing power, you have to own and operate and consume a great deal of energy in order to gain 50% or more. Therefore, having a great deal of computing power makes it less likely for people to engage in fraud. This is a point that Mike Adams misses completely. I hope I explained that well. Give me some feedback here. This is the complexity of it, but it's what's fascinating, and this is the shit that Satoshi Nakamoto had to figure out, because this is innovative stuff. Nobody knows how to operate decentralized networks on a global scale. That kind of shit just doesn't happen. This is brand new stuff. Super exciting. So you got to come up with some pretty creative ways to make this happen. So what Mike Adams refers to as computational wheel spinning, where the difficulty and duration of such wheel spinning is artificially made needlessly complex by the Bitcoin algorithm, he sees it as wheel spinning and needlessly complex. What I see it as, and what Satoshi Nakamoto saw it as a mechanism for ensuring the integrity and validity of the transactions that are taking place, making it more difficult for fraud to take place on the network and for bad actors to take control of 50% or more of the network in order to engage in fraud. And I guess Mike Adams just didn't take the time to read Satoshi Nakamoto's white paper or to look any further. My hypothesis is that he missed out on buying Bitcoin and got kind of pissed off. Either that, or he's kind of paranoid. As I don't know, I'm just speculating here. Okay, and then again, so here's a big fatal error that he says: the admission should be shocking to all Bitcoin holders for the simple reason that if Bitcoin drops below 1,000, mining now becomes unprofitable. So there's something that I learned all about when I was running mining computers, and that's as more computing, so the price of Bitcoin's going up. More people are getting into Bitcoin. More people want to make money from Bitcoin. More people buy mining computers and put them on the network, thus increasing the hashing power and the computational power of the network, thus making it slightly less than 10 minutes to add each block. The computer, every 2016 blocks, I think, the Bitcoin algorithm recalculates the difficulty such that if there's a greater number of hash power and it takes a little bit less than 10 minutes to solve a block, then it becomes more difficult, so it equals out to 10 minutes. Let's say the Bitcoin price does go down less than 1,000. Now the guy that's running his computer in his basement paying 8 cents a kilowatt hour, it's no longer profitable for him to mine. Or maybe there's a whole warehouse, like some of my friends that I visited up in Maine, we were going to invest with them. They had this whole warehouse, they had all this mining computer power, and it was freaking awesome, and they were gonna use the heat from the miners to heat this warehouse where next door there was factory work going on, and and that ended up being a bust. So let's say that the price dips down, all these big mining warehouses were brought on board, and now the price is less than 1,000, and now it's no longer profitable for them to mine those Bitcoin. They're going to pull their computational power off of the network, thus making it easier to solve the block, thus having it take a little bit, no, I'm sorry, thus making it harder for someone to solve the block. Wait, so if the computational power is added, then the competition is more, and so the blocks get solved in less time. Okay, so if people are, the blocks get solved in less time if there's more computational power, the Bitcoin protocol makes it more difficult. If there's less computational power, it takes longer to solve a particular block because it's less difficult. Okay, so people are pulling their computers off the network because it's no longer profitable for them to mine. Well, as the price gets down and people pull and there's less computing power, the difficulty also goes down, making it easier to solve the block, so it goes from less time, from 11 minutes back to 10 minutes. Does that make sense? So there's this equalizer that takes place. As people pull their hashing power off of the network, the difficulty gets smaller. As hash power and computer power gets added to the network, the difficulty gets greater. So Mike Adams' assertion that when Bitcoin drops below 1,000, now mining is going to be unprofitable assumes that it will still cost $1,000 to mine one coin, which is a false assumption illustrating his ignorance. In reality, as the price of Bitcoin goes down, the difficulty for mining those Bitcoins also goes down, and it costs less to mine each particular Bitcoin. Boom. So again, Mike Adams calls it artificial work. That's meaningless, wheel spinning. In reality, it has extreme value, and Bitcoin happens to be the world's strongest computer network, which is absolutely incredible. And as more Bitcoin transactions take place on the network, we can trust that this massive computational behemoth of a computer will be able to handle all that fun. All right, what do we got? So people are saying it's a very good explanation. Not sure if Mike Adams has the brain computational power to comprehend. This is very true. Emilio, please explain again how more computational power doesn't lead to 51%. Okay, so there's something called a 51% attack in cryptocurrency networks, whereby one individual or group of individuals manages to obtain over 50% of the computational power, thus enabling them to add blocks. They're winning all the blocks, and they're adding blocks, and they're rewarding themselves with Bitcoin, or they're reversing all this Bitcoin transactions they sent to people last year. You can do whatever the hell they want. Actually, can they only manipulate the current block, or can they go back a minute? Yeah, I think they could tweak out the entire blockchain. There's another check and balance that's built in. Even if someone were to engage in a 51% attack, other nodes and computers could choose to simply not follow that chain. So if it's like, oh my God, this group of miners is engaging in a 51% attack, that's their chain, this blockchain, it's a fraudulent blockchain, we're going to split off from that chain and we're going to start mining on this other chain. However, if it's a SHA-256 algorithm, just the same, then this same group of miners could then switch over to this one, and we have like espionage going on, and this is crazy. But we'll be able to figure it out without regulators because the network is built in such a way that there's a fragility, anti-fragility in place. Okay, so more computing power doesn't lead to 51%. So so if you have 1 terahash, which is 1,000 hashes. So let's say it's early on in Bitcoin. I was around when, I remember when I was proud to have that got close to reaching a gigabyte when it came to script mining on the Litecoin network or something. Wow. Okay, so there's something called a gigahash, which is giga's 1,000, and then a terahash, which is 1,000 thousandths. And then there's a petahash, right? And so let's say the entire Bitcoin network has the computational power of 1 terahash. It's relatively easier to get half of a terahash compared to getting half of 100,000 petahash, for example. So as the computational hash power expands and expands and expands, so it's easier to take control of half of the network when the network's this big. It's not as easy to take control of half of the network's computing power when that computing power is this big. It takes a lot more money and effort. And the cool thing about Bitcoin mining, much like gold mining, is that it actually, these ASIC chips now, there's like factories that are manufacturing these ASIC chips and pumping them out left and right. And there was literally an arms race. It's still going on right now, but it was fucking crazy for a while. And we, to the point where we would buy a bunch of mining equipment, and before we could even receive it, there would already be better machines that are being offloaded onto the market. And we're getting these machines that are now outdated, adding them to the market after all of this hash power had just gotten added. So literally right now, I can pull it up on blockchain.info. We can actually see the power of the network. So if it's a huge, crazy network, if you go to blockchain.info, there's all sorts of cool information when you click on data. There's all sorts of cool charts, and one of them shows you the Bitcoin difficulty, and you can see actually sometimes the difficulty gets less. It's generally getting higher and higher and higher. Okay, the average block size is 1.07, 393,000 transactions per day. Oh my goodness. Block details, average block size, transactions per block, SegWit adoption, mining information. Here we go, hash rate. You can also see the hash rate distribution between the various miners, and none of them are close to 50%. Some of them are like good actors, and when they get it's really high, they like pull machines off. Okay, so the hash rate now, holy shit, I don't even know how to read this number, is 11,584,046 terahash. That's a lot. I wish I could do a screencast for you guys here. Okay, so it's 11,584.46 terahash, which is huge and phenomenal. And compare that to December 2016, it was 1.98 million terahash. Now it's 11.5 million terahash. That's huge gains in computing power. Okay, so you have this massive terahash, and in order to actually like physically be able to get 51% of that terahash, where the hell are all these computers going to come from? You would either have to buy up, you would have to have like a shadow mine that you've been like Dr. Evil, and you're developing your own low nanometer, highly efficient chips that you're going to add to the network secretly. Or you have to buy a huge significant chunk from massive miners. Maybe you buy out a bunch of the mining pools. Because it takes time for Bitmain, for example, to develop greater, more powerful, more efficient chips. It takes money. It takes millions and millions and millions of dollars to implement this technology, not only to do the research and science behind it, but to actually manufacture it. That's hardcore. That takes a lot of work. That takes a lot of money. It takes a lot of energy, and it takes a lot of time. So the Bitcoin network as it is now is pretty damn distributed. And there are mining pools that have significant chunks, as we can see exactly what the chunks are here. But within those mining pools, it's a bunch of different people that are participating. So the largest, the strongest pool, give it up to Bitmain, Ant Pool's 19.4% of the network, 19.4. But that's not just a Bitmain Incorporated running that. That's a bunch of people that are giving their hash power to Bitmain. And people that actually run, here's another check and balance in the system. People that actually run the computers, Bitcoin miners, are very vested in the Bitcoin network. They're very in the know and knowledgeable. And if they see that a pool they're participating begins to approach 51%, they have the choice to pull their mining power out of that pool and put it in with another pool. It's all like so many checks and balances are in place. It's actually a really beautiful, complex thing that is like Jeffrey Tucker always like gets off on the beauty of freedom and just spontaneous order. And this is incredible. It's exactly why Bitcoin is worth 10,000. It's going to be worth more because it's extremely innovative, beautiful, and amazing. So to answer your question, the greater the hash power, the harder it is, and the more resources it takes to put 51% on the network. And then people are like, I'm sure Mike Adams says this, there's going to be a supercomputer someday that'll just completely dominate the algorithm and overcome all the other miners. And like that stuff, like maybe there will be, but in that same time, all these other Bitcoin miners are going to have even more hardcore computational power and fancier computers and stuff. So I feel confident. When it is very difficult, it costs less to be a good actor. To corrupt the system and try to steal would cost more than potential reward to be a bad actor. That's right. And say someone does take control of 51% of the network, they're faced with the choice. Do I fucking win almost all the blocks or all the blocks and make 12.5 Bitcoin every block, $120,000 every 10 minutes? That's probably the most profitable thing you could do rather than manipulating the network, because when you start to manipulate the network, the other nodes and miners are going to try to ignore your chain. So if you do manage to get that much computational power, then fuck, man, you're in the money. Just run the computer like a good actor and you'll make a ton of money. We'd use less electricity when blocks is easier to solve. That's right, it would cost less electricity. 51 assumes they have exponentially more computer power to change the blockchain. It becomes harder and harder the longer the blockchain gets. At some point, it becomes impossible. Yes, Robert, I linked to his article right there in the description. Good old Bob. Okay, let me get back to the article and I'll answer those questions. We'll wrap up because I don't know how long I've been talking about. 30 minutes. Where is his article? I'll just click on it right here. Okay, Mike Adams illustrating his ignorance about Bitcoin. Bitcoin consumes enormous resources. That's another complaint. Like Bitcoin's not sustainable. It's just like so bad for the environment. My friend Virgil Viduva had a great response to that. Well, great. Like if Bitcoin uses a lot of energy, then Bitcoin's creating a lot of jobs and forcing a lot of innovation for people to come up with new technology so we can fund this massive beast. Surely there's some value in the work that we did to create, McAfee stated. And Mike Adams says there isn't any real world value in it at all. Bitcoin is a digital fiat currency backed by nothing. And the work used to create Bitcoin is actually artificial work. It's made artificially more complex for no logical reason other than a crude mechanism for artificial scarcity. Well, I hope someone shares my video with Mike Adams because we've spent the past 15 minutes explaining the logical reason why this proof of work exists and why it makes so much sense and why it's so beautiful that we have a decentralized network that actually works. And Bitcoin, being a digital fiat currency, is not backed by nothing. It's backed by the participants in the network. It's backed by the human beings that find value and utility in this network. It's backed by the computers that run this network. It's backed by the security that those computers provide. Okay. He goes on to say that Bitcoin is headed for failure, but cryptocurrency is here to stay. The most likely long-term scenario is is that we will see a cryptocurrency backed by JP Morgan and the government. Blockchain with built-in NSA snooping and an identity layer so that all transactions can be tracked by the IRS to enable government confiscation and criminalization as deemed appropriate by the crooks in Washington. This is a classic thing that I'm going to do a video on in the next few days of one of the limiting beliefs when it comes to Bitcoin is that if Bitcoin is so effective and so valuable and so anti-government and against the central banks, the governments are just going to take it over and outlaw it. It's just what's going to happen. This assumes that governments are all powerful. And this is a mindset that many people have adopted that I used to have when I listened to Alex Jones every day in college. And I got news for you, the government isn't all powerful. In fact, the government and those that control it, even the Illuminati and the New World Order and the globalists, are weak. And their power grip is loosening. And their position of dominance over the masses is crumbling. There's also incentives in place that not all governments are controlled by the Illuminati. There's millionaires, bankers, tycoons, industry moguls that also have great influence over the internet. So for people that think the government's going to shut down the internet, there's a lot of people that have major sway when it comes to government actions, and they don't want that to happen because they'll lose a lot of money doing so. Just the same, there's also incentives in place where it's a disincentive for governments to outlaw Bitcoin because the innovation will simply go offshore and they'll miss out on a whole lot of tax dollars and a whole lot of young people that are going to be doing a whole lot of really cool, innovative stuff. And just as in the 70s and 80s, the United States government was so afraid of Russia and the Soviet Union and their quest to outcompete us when it came to science and space exploration, and they changed the entire public curriculum so that there was more of a focus on mathematics and science because they didn't want to get outcompeted by Russia. The same type of phenomenon exists today when it comes to cryptocurrency, whereby most governments don't want to ban cryptocurrencies or outlaw them because all of the innovation and money will simply flock away to another country, and you'll be humiliated and left in the past. Another thing that Mike Adams fails to recognize is that even if governments want to shut down Bitcoin, they can't. And while many people may comply with the law saying it's illegal to own, transact in Bitcoin, many people won't. And for the first time, we have a technology in place that enables us to conduct business globally, internationally, sending and receiving value. And if we so choose, the government can't do a goddamn thing about it. If it's illegal, it increases the risk. But it's certainly a lot easier to engage in black market activity with a banned blockchain cryptocurrency than it is by sending and receiving money or shipping a bunch of $100 bills through the U.S. Postal Service. So don't be so negative and pessimistic, Mike. Don't be so negative and pessimistic, people. The global power structure is literally crumbling right before our very eyes, and you are playing a part of it. So we have every single reason to be absolutely optimistic. And yes, there will be government-approved blockchains, and JP Morgan will probably have their own blockchain, but the Bitcoin blockchain will still remain, as will Monero blockchain, which is very, very private and sovereign. Okay, before we wrap up, so this doesn't go on all night, thank you everybody for watching. I don't doubt that the government will try to put the dollar on the blockchain and will track everyone's purchases. Will this be spurned totally anonymous cryptos? That's right. There's like this awesome response to government control that happens, and it's fucking beautiful, and everything is changing, and it's awesome. And I think we're going to see this phenomenon within Bitcoin where there's going to be white Bitcoins and black Bitcoins, or light and dark Bitcoins. And the white Bitcoins are going to be those Bitcoins that have gone through some sort of know your customer anti-money laundering process, and those addresses are tied to a person's identity, their social security number perhaps. These will be Bitcoins that have gone through exchanges like Coinbase, or that you have used on regulated exchanges, or you participated in a regulated ICO using this Bitcoin. And then there's going to be what's known as black or dark Bitcoins, which aren't tied to an individual identity yet and may never will be. Those are Bitcoins that are newly minted from miners that are putting them out on the market through peer-to-peer transactions, or through unregulated exchanges, or through entities like Shapeshift.io that allow you to exchange cryptocurrency for cryptocurrency without know your customer anti-money laundering identity checks. And it's my belief that the black Bitcoins will actually be worth more than the white Bitcoins. So if you're a miner, hold on to those Bitcoins, keep them private, use Tor if you can when you log into your mining pool, and those Bitcoins may be worth more someday when all this plays out. And again, yes, competition is so beautiful, and cryptocurrency represents the freest of markets out there. So if Bitcoin does get heavily regulated and the government gets way into it, and it's all checked by the IRS or whatever, then money, or people that want to preserve their privacy, will simply flock to currencies like Monero, which is seeing substantial growth. All right, let's answer these questions real quick, and then let's go to bed. Question number 1. So 7 simple, self-evident questions that every Bitcoin holder should be asking themselves. Dun, dun, dun. Question number 1. Apple produces iPhones. Amazon produces fulfillment services for millions of products. What does Bitcoin produce? You fucking got us on that one, Mike. Bitcoin is worthless. Oh my God, I've been fooled all along. I've spent so much time on Bitcoin. It's just been a total waste. This question just totally shattered my world. I'll tell you what Bitcoin produces, Mike. Bitcoin produces the world's first decentralized, fully autonomous network where people can exchange value on a global scale. Total anarchy, total freedom, totally trustless. That's what Bitcoin produces. Bitcoin produces the ability for me to send you money in China or India or Brazil, like that, It used to say cost little to nothing, but now if you wanted to include in the next block, it costs like $2 or $3. But if I were to send you $1 million, I wouldn't mind paying $3 to $5 in order to ensure it got included in the next 10-minute block. That's what Bitcoin produces, Mike. That's all I got to say on that one. It produces trust in a trustless world. It produces the means of exchanging value globally without having to trust a central party. And people these days don't have trust for central parties, rightfully so. Question number 2, Bitcoin's value has increased by 350% in the last 12 months. Man, it's increased by much more now. What has Bitcoin introduced in that time period that would justify a 350% increase in its value? Well, one answer to that is Bitcoin added segregated witness recently, which is a technology innovation that many people appreciate, which enables off-chain transactions to help deal with the volume that's taking place. Some people don't appreciate segregated witness. Okay, so for this question, I understand the point that he's trying to make. Much of Bitcoin's growth and value is due to speculation. I wish I could say that Bitcoin is gaining in adoption when it comes to places that you can spend your Bitcoin. I wish I could say that Bitcoin is the backbone of all sorts of financial institutions that are used regularly by millions and millions of people, but it's not. That's not to say that it never will be, and that's not to say that vast amounts of liquidity and wealth flocking into the Bitcoin ecosystem is a bad thing. That is to say that you should be aware that a lot of this price action is being driven by speculation, and as such, it increases the opportunity for volatility, and it increases the opportunity for a massive correction to take place. So use that wisdom when you invest and make sure that you never put in more than you're willing to lose. But that's how I would answer your question. What has Bitcoin introduced in that time period that would justify a 350% increase? I would say segregated witness. As more people use people, you could say people are adopting Bitcoin when they just simply buy Bitcoin. That's adoption in some way. But in my eyes, adoption is when it's used in real world commerce. And it's not used as much as I would like it to be. And in fact, we were like on the cutting edge of trying to drive adoption, traveling around the country, talking to businesses, putting the Bitcoin ecosystem to the test in our school bus. And there's not much growth that I've seen in that area in the past few years. There's not new killer apps that are being released, and there's not millions of people that are using Bitcoin on a daily basis. And there probably is globally millions of people that are using Bitcoin, real world utility, buying goods online. It's really simple to conduct and exchange commerce. But now that the price is more expensive, it doesn't make sense for me to buy a $20 book using Bitcoin when it's a $2 or $3 transaction fee. Nor does it make sense for an entrepreneur to receive Bitcoin, because you would have to wait for a while for the transaction to verify. I mean, I guess you could wait. You could wait, but as a consumer, I want to know that my transaction went through, and I have to wait to make sure it gets included in the block within 30 minutes or an hour or the next day. So I got you, Mike. Yes, that's a given. Bitcoin's price is being driven by speculation. So what? What's your fucking point? Question 3, Bitcoin is being promoted as a store of value, yet it frequently will correct by 30 to 50% in under 48 hours. What is your definition of a store of value, and how does Bitcoin fulfill your definition? Okay, so Bitcoin's on this quest to become a legitimate currency. One of the tenets of a legitimate currency is that it can be used as a store of value. It can also be used as a medium of exchange, and it can be divisible in a convenient fashion, like gold or silver coins, right? So Bitcoin's price, there's been periods where Bitcoin was relatively stable and the price remained at 300 to 400 for quite some time, 800 for quite some time, 1,000 for quite some time, 2,000 for quite some time. But again, there's a lot of speculation going on, and the market cap is getting bigger and bigger. But as that market cap gets bigger, it's going to take a lot more wealth being inputted into the Bitcoin ecosystem in order for there to be a 30 to 50% correction, either up or down. So and again, this is the brand new shit, man. The Federal Reserve Bank's been around since 1913. The U.S. Department of Treasury's been around for much longer than that. The U.S. dollar, I don't know when it was founded, but it must have been like 200 or 300 years ago. That shit's old and archaic. Central banking's been around for a whole lot of time. Mike Adams, Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, brand spanking new, my friend. Give it a little time. Patience. Patience, Mike. It's brand new. As more money comes in, as the market cap gets larger, the price will stabilize, and it may be a legitimate store of value. Now, if you want to make some fucking money, it sure as hell is a store of value because the price is going up and up and up, but that's not to say that it won't correct. And yes, there is a lot of value in having a stable, valued currency that people can depend on and put their trust and faith in. And Bitcoin, we don't have that. So what's the point again? Just like question number 2, yes, Bitcoin, the price is being driven by speculation. That doesn't take away from the real world utility that Bitcoin has to offer or the innovative advances in technology and solving decentralization problems that Bitcoin has offered the world. So what? So what? It's not the best store of value because the price isn't stable compared to other ways you can store your value right now. What the fuck's your point, man? Give it some time and it will stabilize. Question 4, if you're holding Bitcoin in the hopes of selling it at a higher price, how will you know when to sell it? This is like, oh, it's like a getcha question, but here's, pull up a chart of Bitcoin's price action, a candlestick chart, and learn a wee bit about technical analysis. Like I have a book right here. Here's the answer to your question, Mike. You get a book like this, How to Day Trade for a Living. You go to the chapter that explains what technical analysis and what candlesticks are and how to spot patterns and trend reversals. And you read a book, Mike Adams, and you learn to spot a trend reversal like this. So how do you know when to sell Bitcoin? You can pull up a week-long chart, a 3-day chart, or a 1-day chart. And as the price is gaining steam, and then you see a shooting star doji, which looks like that, where the price it closes at a lower price than where it started, and you have a red candlestick, and you also have massive price action on the top and bottom. This is an indication that the bull gains right here are more than likely going to reverse. So to answer your question, Mike, when do you know when to sell it? Well, it depends on how much risk averse you are, which is completely subjective. It depends on what, maybe you have a goal. Maybe you want to invest money and make enough gains so you can pay off your college loans or buy your wife a car. But the answer to your question is, when you want to know when the best time to sell it is you use technical analysis and you see when there's a trend reversal and you try to sell at the top. Another answer to that question is, you hold on for dear life, baby, HODL, and you sell it when you're good and ready, when Bitcoin's worth 100,000 a piece. Question 4 can be applied to anything. So you invested in Apple in the hopes of selling it at a higher price. How will you know when to sell it? What the fuck kind of question is that? It doesn't serve to undermine Bitcoin in the least bit. Question number 5. What does Bitcoin offer to secure its dominant market position that no other cryptocurrency offers? Network effect. Easy question. Bitcoin has the largest network effect. What's a network effect? The number of people participating in the network, giving it strength, giving it validity, giving it momentum, giving it exposure, giving it high liquidity, high volume, lots of wealth and money. Bitcoin has a far higher network effect than any other cryptocurrency, which in large part is why it's predominant. Not to mention it's the first to market. Not to mention it's one of the most safe and secure because, as we talked about before, it has such a strong computing power and so much hashing power on the network. However, there's many great innovations that are taking place with Monero for privacy, with Dash for self-funded marketing and innovations on the network, with Ethereum for the ability to easily code smart contracts. So what's the point of your question, my friend? That's an easy one to answer also. Question number 6. What is the profile of the typical new buyer to Bitcoin today versus 5 years ago? The typical buyer 5 years ago was either like a crypto geek, tech junkie, libertarian, anarchist, someone that's usually on the cutting edge of new technologies. In other words, people that don't have a lot of money. Unless you fucking mined a bunch of Bitcoin when you could do it on your laptop. The new buyer today is more of an average mainstream person. People that have expendable income, and Wall Street institutional money is now flooding into Bitcoin, which in large part is why we have such massive price action, because there's so much more money being put into Bitcoin now than there ever has been before. I'm not exactly sure what the point of your question is, Mike, but thank you for asking. Question number 7. This is his ultimate gotcha. The question that will completely diminish any value that you may give to Bitcoin in your head. This is the unholy question that as Bitcoin supporters, we can never ask. Because if we do, it only serves to demonstrate how faulty and fragile Bitcoin truly is. Question number 7. How will you sell Bitcoin if the power grid goes down? This question comes up a lot. Here's how I always answer it. What happens to Bitcoin if the power grid goes down? The power grid goes down on a massive scale. So if the power grid went down in Houston recently, went down in South Austin when there was massive hurricanes taking place. It goes down when there's natural disasters or outages or like heat waves. The power grid goes down in a smaller geographic area relative to the whole country or the whole globe. The blockchain still exists. Bitcoin still works. You probably still have power on your phone. Hopefully you're prepared. Maybe you have solar. Maybe you have battery backup. Maybe you have a DC to AC converter. You could charge your phone. You could still interact and interface with the blockchain. If the power grid goes down in a massive scale, like if there's an electromagnetic pulse attack from North Korea, for example, or the Cold War heats up and the Soviets drop an EMP over the United States of America and North America, or if there's some massive catastrophic cataclysmic weather event that just, or like there's some Planet X Nibiru type of event that totally shifts the gravitational pull on Earth and the entire power grid goes down, Bitcoin is the least of my worries. So is gold. So is money. I'm worried about keeping my family safe from looters, rioters, and I'm worried about making sure I can feed my children. That's what's most important to me, Mike. So how will you sell Bitcoin if the power grid goes down? I won't. I'll fucking squad the fuck up and grab my shotgun and my AK and get ready. Because shit's going down if the power grid's down, man. I'll be remembering all the stuff that I learned about when we made the Sovereign Living series, and we did all sorts of work on survivalism and food storage, which now that I've been all obsessed with other things like Kratom and cryptocurrency, I need to get back to those roots, actually. So yeah, to answer your question, you can't sell Bitcoin when the power grid's down. You can actually make offline transactions, but I've never done it. I'd like to see it done, but it's fucking complex as hell and no one could probably do it. But when the power grid goes back up, the Bitcoin blockchain is still going to exist. And to assume that the power grid's never going to go up and just going to be a Mad Max scenario, then Bitcoin isn't as important as other things. Also, to answer your question, it's important to diversify your investments. So for years and years, I've been into alternative currencies. And before I even learned about Bitcoin, Catherine and I were out educating people about the value of silver and gold, especially junk silver and small denominational silver, like 10th ounce silver rounds or silver ounces. So you diversify your investments. You store a bunch of cash in your safe or under the mattress. You have gold, grains, and guns, because I can assure you ammo will be far more valuable than Bitcoin when shit hits the fan. It'll also be probably more valuable than your dollars. Stock medicine, ibuprofen when shit hits the fan. That stuff's going to be valuable. Kratom's going to be valuable when shit hits the fan. It's the ultimate bug out survival pain remedy. And stack gold and silver. So shit hits the fan, maybe there'll be some sort of exchange market that takes place in your local area at the farmer's market or something, and people are willing to take silver. I don't know. But people act like this is some big fatal flaw with Bitcoin, that it doesn't operate when the internet's not working or the power's down. In reality, nothing fucking operates when the power's down or the grid's down or the internet's down. Your credit cards and your bank account is worth shit when that happens. And when that happens, the most important thing is protecting yourself and ensuring that you can feed yourself and fend off starving hordes of crazy fucking people that are now doing terrible, terrible things like you see in Walking Dead, because fathers don't want to watch their children starve, and probably their ethics go out the door. So to answer your question, how will you sell Bitcoin if the power grid goes down? You won't. You will fucking squad the fuck up. He has a website, bitrape.com and bitcoincrash.news. I got to start questioning his motives and wondering why one individual would put so much effort into undermining, or at least attempting to, obviously he's not undermining, Bitcoin. Online cryptocurrency wallet accidentally torches 300 million worth of Ether coins. Crypto cultist panic. Amazon launched its own cryptocurrency. New domain registration provides clues. Saudi billionaire warns Bitcoin will implode like Enron. Cryptocurrency calm before the storm. Governments are studying to find out the means to take control of it. It's a bunch of fucking fear porn about Bitcoin. He has two websites that look the exact same. Oh, Mike Adams. We need to grab a beer, my friend. Okay. This has been my long rant about Mike Adams' article. So let me sum up. I like to give a summary at the end of my long spiels. Came across an article a few weeks ago titled John McAfee accidentally just revealed why Bitcoin is a total fraud. Behold the logic of artificial work. In this article, Mike Adams, editor of Natural News, also known as the Health Ranger, believes that he has exposed some fraud that Bitcoin has, and John McAfee idiotically revealed it. Because John McAfee says that Bitcoin has value compared to the dollar because it costs $1,000 to generate one Bitcoin, because I'm a miner, and there's something called proof of work. Mike Adams goes on to say that mining and proof of work is nothing but computational wheel spinning operations where the difficulty and duration of such wheel spinning is artificially made needlessly complex by the Bitcoin algorithm. As I explained earlier, this proof of work function serves a purpose on a decentralized network. You have a decentralized network with no central commander, no central authority. People are going to add computers to this centralized network, mining computers, because they want to earn the Bitcoin that you're rewarded with for solving a block. The more people that put their Bitcoin, their computers, their miners on the network, the more decentralized the network is, thus the more safe and secure and anti-fragile the network is. This is all a good thing for we Bitcoin users. As more people add their Bitcoin computing power to the network, it gets more difficult to mine a block and to solve a block. As it gets more difficult and as there's more computing power, it also gets more difficult to defraud the Bitcoin network by executing a 51% attack. This proof of work function isn't wheel spinning or needless. It serves to ensure that there's enough computing power on the network that transactions can be computed and validated in a fast and efficient manner, and there's such a vast amount of computing power on the network that it's difficult to defraud the Bitcoin network. Mike Adams goes on to say that in a world where Bitcoin, that this admission that it costs $1,000 to mine one Bitcoin should be shocking to all Bitcoin holders for the simple reason that if Bitcoin drops below $1,000, mining now becomes unprofitable. Mike Adams illustrates his own ignorance in this instance because he fails to understand that as mining power gets taken off of the network, it gets easier to mine Bitcoin. As Bitcoin drops in price, more people take their computers off of the network, the difficulty goes down and it gets easier to mine those computers, thus costing less money, reaching a point of equilibrium whereby people start, so the price is going down, people are pulling their computers off, difficulty is getting easier, reaches a point where now they can profitably, they no longer can profitably mine, they pull their computers out, the difficulty gets easier, it takes a longer time to solve that block because there's less computing power on the network. So the Bitcoin algorithm adjusts the difficulty so that it's more difficult and it reaches that 10-minute that it's supposed to have every single time. And it all equals out. If the price goes up, more people put their computers back on the network because now they can make money because it costs less to mine than the Bitcoin they're rewarded with, and the Bitcoin difficulty thus changes. So if the Bitcoin price were to drop below $1,000, he says mining would become unprofitable. People would pull their computers off the network, and mining would be profitable for certain people that have highly efficient machines and that pay little to nothing for energy. Okay, we went over a whole lot of complex stuff, and I ended up talking for an hour, and now it's 2 a.m. So thank you for watching. I hope this was valuable information as we dug deep into what Bitcoin mining is and why it's valuable to a decentralized network. It's John Bush signing out. If you stuck with me this long, thank you for paying attention to what I have to say. Peace and freedom. I'm out.